Chapter 1. Blood on the Snowth Mountain Pass had no name, only a reputation for swallowing travelers whole. Elena stumbled through knee-deep snow, her breath coming in ragged clouds that vanished into the starless night. Blood seeped through the makeshift bandage she'd torn from her petticoat, staining the white landscape with dark blooms. 3 days since she'd fled the estate. 3 days since she'd discovered the truth about her husband's debts. The men he'd sold her to. The auction that would have stripped her of everything: her body, her will, her name. She'd chosen the mountains instead. Chosen the cold. Her vision blurred. The wound in her side, courtesy of a guard's blade when she'd fought her way past the gate, burned with every step. She pressed her palm against it, felt the warmth of her own blood soaking through her cloak, and knew with clinical certainty that she wouldn't survive the night. The wind howled like something alive, something hungry. Good, she thought distantly. Let it take me. Better the mountain than those men. She collapsed against an outcropping of black rock, her legs finally giving out. The stone was slick with ice, older than memory, jutting from the snow like broken teeth. She slumped there, her back against the ancient surface, and let her eyes drift closed. That was when she heard the voice. You're bleeding. Elena's eyes snapped open. A man stood before her. No, not stood, materialized. One moment the pass had been empty. The next he was there, as though the shadows themselves had taken form and learned to walk. He was tall, impossibly so, dressed in black that seemed to drink the meager moonlight. His coat was long, tailored with an elegance that spoke of old money and older power. But it was his face that stopped her heart, beautiful in the way of Renaissance paintings, all sharp angles and aristocratic lines, skin pale as the snow around them. His hair was dark, swept back from a high forehead, and his eyes were wrong. They caught the light like a wolf's, reflecting silver gold in the darkness. Ancient eyes, predator's eyes. Stay back, Elena whispered, though she had no strength left for threats. Her hand fumbled at her belt for the small knife she'd stolen from the kitchen, but her fingers were too numb to slow. The creature tilted his head, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. You've been running for days. It wasn't a question. His voice was low, cultured, with an accent she couldn't place. Too refined for these wild mountains, too controlled for anything human. How do you? She coughed. Tasted copper. How do you know that? He moved then, and it was like watching water flow, fluid, inevitable, inhuman. He crouched before her, close enough that she could see her own frightened reflection in those impossible eyes. Close enough that she noticed he cast no breath into the frozen air. Your wounds tell me, he said quietly. The blade that opened your side. It's been 3 days, perhaps 4, and you've had no care. The exhaustion in your blood, the desperation in your scent. You're running from something worse than death. Elena's laugh was bitter, broken. And you? What are you? Something flickered across his perfect features. Surprise, perhaps, or respect. He reached out slowly, giving her time to flinch away, but she was too tired to move. His fingers brushed the edge of her wound through the blood-soaked fabric, feather light, and she gasped at the cold of his touch. I am what your stories warned you about, he said. I am the thing that hunts in the dark between kingdoms. I am House Draven's sole heir, keeper of the Northern Territories, bound by oaths older than your country's name. He withdrew his hand, and his fingers glistened with her blood in the moonlight. I am what you would call vampire, though that word doesn't quite capture it. She should have screamed, should have prayed, should have done anything but stare at him with a strange, detached fascination. Are you going to kill me? Her voice was steadier than she expected. His eyes met hers, and for a heartbeat, she saw something flicker there, something almost like loneliness. No, he said, though you're doing an admirable job of it yourself. He stood, extending his hand to her. Elena stared at it, at the pale elegance of his fingers, at the promise of something she couldn't name. I don't understand, she whispered. You will. He kept his hand outstretched, patient as stone. But first, you need to decide. Do you want to survive this night, or shall I leave you to the mountain's mercy? Elena looked past him at the endless expanse of snow, at the darkness that pressed in from all sides. She thought of the men hunting her, of the life she'd escaped, of the husband who'd bartered her away like livestock. She thought of the wound in her side and the cold seeping into her bones. Then she looked back at the vampire, at the creature who should terrify her, who probably would once shock war. Often saw in his ancient eyes something she recognized. Isolation. The particular loneliness of someone who'd forgotten what it meant to be seen. She placed her trembling hand in his fingers closed around hers. Cold and strong and impossibly gentle, and the world tilted. He lifted her as though she weighed nothing, cradling her against his chest, and began to walk, where she started, but her voice faded. Somewhere safe, he said. Somewhere the men hunting you cannot follow. Somewhere you can heal. He glanced down at her, and in the moonlight, his face was terrible and beautiful all at once. My name is Lucian Draven, and you, bleeding girl, who chose mountains over men, have just become the most dangerous secret in the kingdom. Elena wanted to ask what he meant, wanted to protest, wanted to do something other than let a vampire carry her into the unknown. But consciousness was slipping, the blood loss finally claiming its due. And the last thing she registered before darkness took her was the steady, impossible absence where his heartbeat should have been. Chapter 2. The sanctuary. Avaline awoke to silence, not the ordinary quiet of empty rooms, but a profound absence of sound that pressed against her ears like physical weight. No wind, no creaking wood, no distant voices or animal cries. Just stillness, ancient and absolute. Her eyes opened to darkness, then adjusted. Stone ceiling arched above her, carved with patterns that hurt to look at, directly symbols that seemed to shift when she wasn't focusing on them. Candlelight flickered from iron sconces, casting shadows that moved wrong, too slow to deliberate. She lay in a bed far too fine for any place she'd ever belonged. Black silk sheets, soft as water, pillows stuffed with down. The mattress beneath her felt like sleeping on clouds, and for a disorienting moment, she wondered if she'd died after all. Then the pain in her side reminded her otherwise. Elena pushed herself upright, gasping. The wound, she reached for it, expecting blood-soaked fabric and tearing agony. Instead, her fingers found clean linen bandages, expertly wrapped, and beneath them, the sharp ache of healing flesh. Someone had tended her. Someone had undressed her, cleaned her, stopped the bleeding. The vampire, Lucian. Memory crashed back. The mountain pass. The blood on snow, impossible. Eyes reflecting moonlight. She looked down at herself and found she wore a nightgown of white cotton, simple and modest, nothing like the silk sheets beneath her. Her own clothes were nowhere to be seen. You're awake. Elena's head snapped toward the voice. He stood in the doorway, or perhaps he'd been there all along and she simply hadn't noticed. Lucian Draven, vampire lord, keeper of northern territories, looking exactly as he had on the mountain. Beautiful, dangerous, utterly still. Where am I? Her voice came out stronger than she felt. My home. He moved into the room with that unnatural grace, carrying a tray. What remains of House Draven's ancestral seat? The locals call it the Black Keep, though it hasn't housed a court in 3 centuries. He set the tray on a table beside the bed. Elena saw bread, cheese, dried fruit, a pitcher of water, human food. The consideration of it unsettled her. How long? She asked. 2 days. He remained standing, maintaining careful distance. Your wound was infected. I cleaned it, applied what medicines I keep for. He paused. For occasions such as this, you tend many bleeding humans in your keep? A ghost of something amusement, perhaps, crossed his features. No, you're the first in a very long time. Elena studied him in the candlelight. He wore different clothes now, simpler, black shirt open at the collar, dark trousers, no coat. She could see the pale column of his throat, the inhuman perfection of his skin. No pulse visible, no breath that she could detect. Why? She asked quietly. Why help me? Lucian was silent for a long moment. He turned to one of the windows she could see now. They were narrow, arrow slits in thick stone, and looked out at whatever lay beyond. When he spoke, his voice carried centuries. 300 years ago, I found a woman bleeding in the snow. She'd fled a husband who beat her, nobles who wanted to use her, a world that gave her no choice but suffering or death. His shoulders tensed beneath the black fabric. I left her there, told myself it wasn't my concern, that humans die, and that's simply the way of things. I found her body the next morning, frozen, eyes still open, Elena's breath caught. I told myself then, never again. He turned back to her, and his eyes were terrible with memory. Never again would I walk past someone choosing mountains over monsters. Because at least monsters can sometimes be reasoned with. And the men hunting me? Elena forced herself to ask. They'll come looking. They already have. Lucian's voice went cold. 3 of them. 2 days passed. They made it as far as the outer wall before. He stopped. Before what? Before they decided the mountains were safer after all. His smile was sharp enough to cut. House Draven may be diminished, but our reputation still carries weight. No human hunters will breach these walls. Elena should have felt relief. Instead, a new fear crystallized. What do you want from me? The question hung between them like drawn steel. Lucian moved closer, and Elena's instinct screamed to pull back, but she held her ground. He stopped at the edge of the bed, close enough that she could see the inhuman stillness of him. No breathing, no pulse, no unconscious shifts of weight that living things make. I want nothing, he said quietly. You're free to leave when you're healed. I'll provide supplies, a map, safe passage to whichever city you choose. I keep no prisoners here. But, his eyes met hers. But you're wounded, alone, and hunted. Leaving now would be suicide. So I offer you sanctuary until you're strong enough to survive out there. He gestured vaguely toward the window. Days, weeks, however long it takes. In exchange, I ask only that you respect the rules of this house. Rules? Elena's fingers clutched the silk sheets. Don't enter the East Wing, it's structurally unsound. Don't go outside after dark unless I'm with you. There are things in these mountains worse than me. Don't invite anyone across the threshold. Vampiric law is specific about such things. He paused. And don't ask me to feed from you. The last rule landed like a stone in deep water. I wasn't going to, Elena said, though heat crept up her neck. Good. Lucian stepped back, creating distance again. Because I don't feed from humans anymore. Haven't in centuries. I survive on animal blood, and it's enough. Why stop? Something painful flickered across his face. Because consent matters, and hunger makes it impossible to trust your own intentions. Better to starve a little than become the thing I despise. Elena looked at him, really looked, and saw beneath the aristocratic bearing and predatory grace something she understood intimately. Self-imposed isolation, penance, the particular prison of someone who'd decided they didn't deserve connection. How long have you been alone here? She asked softly. Lucian turned away. Eat, rest, heal. We can discuss philosophy when you're stronger. He moved toward the door. Lucian, he stopped, his hand on the frame. Thank you, Elena said, for not leaving me on the mountain. His shoulders rose and fell, not breath, but the ghost of it, a remembered human gesture. Thank you for taking my hand, he replied, and then he was gone. The door closing with a soft click that echoed in the profound silence. Elena sat in the enormous bed, surrounded by silk and shadows, and realized she'd just made a bargain with a vampire who kept his darkness locked away as tightly as she'd locked away her own. Outside, something howled in the mountains. Inside, for the first time in months, Elena felt almost safe. Chapter 3. Shadows and Secret. Selena spent the third day exploring. Her wound had improved enough to walk without gasping, though she kept one hand pressed to her side out of habit. The nightgown had been replaced by clothes she'd found folded at the foot of her bed that morning, simple but well-made, wool trousers, a linen shirt, a thick cardigan that smelled faintly of lavender and age. They fit perfectly, which unsettled her more than she cared to admit. How long had Lucian been planning to house a human woman? The Black Keep was a labyrinth of stone corridors and forgotten rooms. Elena moved through halls lined with portraits whose eyes seemed to follow her, past libraries thick with dust, through a conservatory where dead plants still clung to their trellises in skeletal devotion. Everything spoke of grandeur abandoned, of a house that had once thrummed with life and now held only echoes. She noticed things, small things that accumulated into larger questions. Every mirror she passed was covered with black cloth. Every window was narrow, defensible, designed to let in minimal light. The doors were thick oak reinforced with iron, and she'd counted 7 separate locks on the main entrance. The kitchen, when she finally found it, was stocked with preserved foods, dried goods, things that could last years. But no fresh bread, no milk gone sour, no signs of regular use, and nowhere, in any room she entered, did she find Lucian. It was past noon when she discovered the portrait. It hung in what must have been a formal receiving room, a massive canvas in an ornate frame, depicting a family. A man who could only be a younger Lucian, though his eyes held less weight, less sorrow, stood beside a woman of breathtaking beauty. 2 children sat at their feet, a boy and a girl, both dark-haired and laughing. Elena stared at the painted family, at the warmth captured in oil and pigment, and felt something crack open in her chest. This lonely creature who'd saved her, who stalked these empty halls like a ghost in his own home. He'd once had this, had loved, been loved, belonged to something whole. My wife, my children. Elena spun. Lucian stood in the doorway, so still she hadn't heard him approach. In the afternoon light filtering through the narrow windows, he looked even less human to pale to perfect, like a statue that had learned to move. I'm sorry, Elena said quickly. I didn't mean to pry, you weren't prying. I left the portrait uncovered. He moved into the room, his gaze fixed on the painting. Everything else I draped or stored away, but this, I couldn't. What happened to them? Lucian was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, plague. 1487. It swept through the territory in 3 months, killed thousands. His voice was carefully empty. I was already turned by then, had been for nearly 2 centuries. I thought I could protect them. Believed my immortality would shield them somehow, but it didn't. No, the word fell like stone. I watched them die, one by one, held them as the fever took them. My daughter went first. She was 7. Then my son, barely 10. My wife lasted longest, and I think that was cruelest. She had to bury them both before the sickness claimed her too. Elena's throat tightened. You couldn't turn them? His laugh was bitter. Vampiric law forbids turning children. The immortality breaks their minds. As for my wife, he closed his eyes. She begged me not to. Said she'd rather die human and whole than live forever as something else. Said she'd see our children in whatever came after. And I couldn't follow there. So you've been alone since then. 339 years this spring. Lucian opened his eyes, and they were terrible with accumulated solitude. The other vampire houses pulled away after the plague. Thought House Draven was cursed, tainted. They stopped sending envoys, stopped honoring old alliances. Eventually, I stopped trying to maintain connections. Easier to be alone than constantly reminded of what I'd lost. Elena understood that impulse more than she'd like to admit. How many times had she hidden her bruises, her shame, rather than face the pity in others' eyes? Is that why you don't feed from humans anymore? She asked softly. Lucian turned to her, surprise flickering across his features. Clever girl. Yes. After she died, I couldn't. The intimacy of it, the trust required. Feeding is, he paused, searching for words. It's not just hunger. It's connection, vulnerability. For both parties, if done correctly. I couldn't bear that closeness again. So you starve, so I survive. He moved toward the window, putting distance between them. Animal blood keeps me functional, if weakened. I sleep more than I should, heal slower than I used to. But it's enough. Elena watched him stand silhouetted against the light, this ancient creature who'd chosen deprivation over intimacy, isolation over risk. She thought of her own choices, the walls she'd built, the numbness she'd cultivated. The way she'd made herself small and quiet to survive her marriage. You haven't asked me, she said suddenly, about who I'm running from. What I did. Lucian glanced back at her. Your past is yours to share or keep. I won't demand your secrets as payment for sanctuary, but you're curious, endlessly. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. You fled in winter, wounded, chose certain death over whatever waited behind you. You didn't scream when I revealed what I am. You take in strange houses and stranger hosts with remarkable composure. Yes, Elena, I'm curious. But curiosity doesn't entitle me to your pain. The use of her name she hadn't remembered telling him sent warmth through her chest. My husband, she began, then stopped. Started again. The man I married sold me, to cover his gambling debts. There was to be an auction, and she wrapped her arms around herself. I wasn't going to let strange men bid on me like livestock. So I ran. Lucian's hands clenched at his sides, the first uncontrolled movement she'd seen from him. Their names? What? The men who hunted you. Their names? There was something dangerous in his voice now, something that reminded her he was predator first, protector second. It doesn't matter, Elena said quickly. They're gone. You frightened them away, for now. He turned fully to face her, and his eyes caught the light like polished coins. But men like that don't stop. They'll regroup, bring reinforcements, tell themselves stories about monsters and curses until their fear becomes anger. They'll come back, then I'll be gone before they do. Will you? He tilted his head, studying her. Where will you go? What city will shelter a woman with no family, no references, no coin? How long before you're desperate enough to make another bad bargain? The truth of it stung, because she'd been avoiding asking herself the same questions. I'll figure it out, she said, lifting her chin. I always do. Something shifted in Lucian's expression. Respect? Maybe. Or recognition. Yes, I suspect you will. He moved toward the door, then paused. Dinner is at sunset. Join me in the dining hall if you wish. Or I can have food brought to your room. Your choice always. He left before she could respond, his footsteps silent on the stone floor. Elena turned back to the portrait, to the painted family, frozen in a moment of warmth and belonging. She understood now why he'd saved her, why he'd offered sanctuary to a stranger bleeding in the snow. He was trying to rewrite an old story, trying to save someone, anyone, because he couldn't save them. Outside, the sun began its descent toward the mountains, and somewhere in the depths of the keep, Elena heard a clock chime the hour. Though she'd seen no clocks in her wandering, she decided she would join him for dinner. After all, they were both running from ghosts. Chapter 4. Breaking bread with darkness. Dining hall was smaller than Elena expected. Not the cavernous banquet room she'd imagined, but an intimate space with a table set for two. Candles burned in silver candelabras, their flames steady in the still air. The table itself was polished mahogany, set with porcelain plates edged in gold. Crystal glasses that caught the light like trapped stars. Lucian stood when she entered, a gesture so antiquated it made her throat tight. He'd changed clothes, black jacket over a deep burgundy waistcoat, his dark hair tied back with a ribbon. He looked like he'd stepped from another century, which she supposed he had. You came, he said, and she heard genuine surprise beneath the formal greeting. You invited me. Elena moved to the chair he indicated, letting him push it in another old-world courtesy that felt strange after years of her husband's casual cruelty. The food was simple but perfect. Roasted vegetables, fresh bread that steamed when she broke it open, a thick stew fragrant with herbs. Her stomach growled audibly. Please, Lucian said, settling into his own chair. Eat. Elena noticed his plate held nothing. His glass was filled with something dark red that definitely wasn't wine. You're not eating, she observed, reaching for the bread. I ate earlier. His lips quirked. Though not what you're imagining. Rabbit. There's a warren in the western woods. She paused, butter knife halfway to the bread. You hunt rabbits. Among other things. Deer. When I can manage it. The occasional wild boar, though they're faster than they look. He lifted his glass, swirled the contents. It's not glamorous, but it's honest. Elena took a bite of stew to cover her confusion. It was delicious, complex, perfectly seasoned, clearly made by someone who understood food. You cook this? I've had considerable time to learn. Lucian watched her eat with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable, but somehow wasn't. Cooking is chemistry, precision, care. It appealed to me. Still does, even though I can't taste it anymore. Can't taste? Everything tastes like ash now. Has for 3 centuries. He set down his glass. It's one of the costs. We keep other senses, smell, touch, sight, but taste fades. Some vampires say it's a mercy. Makes it easier to forget what we were. I think it's a punishment. Elena chewed slowly, thinking about a lifetime of food turned to dust on the tongue. What do you miss most? The question seemed to catch him off guard. He was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing the stem of his glass. Honey cakes. My wife used to make them for winter solstice. She'd add cinnamon, cardamom, a touch of orange zest. His voice softened with memory. The whole keep would smell like comfort for days. Tell me about her, Elena said impulsively. Your wife. What was her name? Marguerite. The name came out like prayer. She was a merchant's daughter, intelligent, stubborn, utterly unimpressed by titles. We met at a harvest festival. I was already turned, hiding what I was, trying to maintain the illusion of mortal nobility. She saw through me in 5 minutes. Elena leaned forward. She knew, not specifically, but she knew I was hiding something, and instead of being afraid, she was curious. Lucian's expression grew distant. She cornered me in a garden and said, whatever you are, you're doing a terrible job of pretending to be something else. Either tell me the truth or stop looking at me like I'm the sun and you're seeing it for the first time in centuries. Despite everything, Elena smiled. What did you do? I told her the truth. Showed her my true nature, the speed, the strength, the hunger. Expected her to run. He shook his head slowly. She asked if I'd killed anyone. I said not in 200 years. She asked if I planned to. I said never again. She said, good. Now ask me to dance properly. Not like you're made of stone. She sounds remarkable. She was. Lucian's voice carried the weight of centuries. She made me remember how to be more than hunger and darkness, made me want to be worthy of her trust. Elena took another bite of stew, let the silence stretch comfortable between them. Outside, night had fully fallen, and the candles seemed brighter now, pushing back against the darkness, pressing at the windows. Your turn, Lucian said quietly. My turn? You know my ghosts. I'd like to know yours, if you're willing to share. Elena's fingers tightened on her spoon. She'd spent so long keeping secrets, wearing masks, that the idea of honesty felt dangerous. But something about this quiet room, this lonely vampire who cooked meals he couldn't taste, it made her want to try. I married for love, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. Or what I thought was love. Thomas was charming, attentive, everything I'd dreamed of. My parents died when I was young, and I'd been so alone. He made me feel seen, but he wasn't what he seemed. No, the word tasted bitter. The charm lasted 6 months. Then came the gambling, the drinking, the other things. She touched her side reflexively where the wound was healing. He'd disappear for weeks, come back with debts and excuses. I kept thinking if I was better, quieter, more perfect, he'd change back into the man I'd married. He was never that man, Lucian said gently. The mask was the lie. The cruelty was truth. I know that now. Elena set down her spoon, appetite fading. When I found the contract, the one selling me to pay his debts, I realized I'd been choosing my own cage. Telling myself it was love when it was just fear of being alone again. So you ran. So I ran. She met his eyes across the table. And a vampire found me bleeding in the snow and brought me to his haunted castle. I think there's a fairy tale like this, but I can't remember if it ends well. Lucian's laugh was soft, genuine. Neither can I. We'll have to write our own ending. They sat in companionable silence, the candles burning lower, the darkness outside pressing close. Elena finished her meal while Lucian sipped his dark sustenance, and for the first time since she'd fled her old life, she felt something unfurl in her chest. Not safety exactly, not happiness, but possibility. The fragile sense that maybe, just maybe, she could be something other than afraid. Thank you, she said finally, for the meal, for listening, for not making me feel broken. You're not broken. Lucian's voice was fierce. You're wounded. There's a difference. Wounds heal, if given care and time. Is that what you tell yourself? He smiled, sad and knowing. Every night for 300 years. Someday I might even believe it. Elena stood, and Lucian rose with her, ever the gentleman from another age. Will you walk with me? She asked impulsively. Just around the keep? I'm not ready to sleep yet. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, pleasure, weariness all at once. Are you certain? It's dark, and I'm a vampire who keeps his darkness locked away tighter than any chain, she finished. Who cooks meals he can't taste, and saves bleeding strangers from mountains. Yes, Lucian, I'm certain. He offered his arm, formal and careful. Elena took it, felt the impossible cold of him through his jacket, the inhuman stillness, and found she wasn't afraid. They walked through candlelit halls together, two wounded souls learning to trust again, while outside the mountains kept their ancient watch, and something howled at the moon. Chapter 5. When wolves come calling, the attack came. At dawn, Elena woke to the sound of glass shattering, followed by shouting rough male voices echoing through the stone corridors. She bolted upright, heart hammering, and for one disorienting moment thought she was back at the estate, that Thomas had found her. Then she remembered where she was. She threw off the silk sheets and ran to the door, pressing her ear against the wood. More shouting. Closer now. The clash of metal. A scream that cut off abruptly. In the north wing. Search every room, said she'd be here. The bastards keeping her, find the girl, kill the creature. Burn this whole damn place. Her blood turned to ice. They'd come for her. Somehow they'd found her. Elena's mind raced. The window was too narrow to climb through. The door was her only exit, but she could hear boots on stone, getting closer. She looked around desperately for a weapon, and settled on the iron poker from the cold fireplace. The footsteps stopped outside her door. This one, a voice said. I can smell her fear. The handle turned. Elena raised the poker, hands shaking and prepared to fight. The door swung open, revealing a man in hunting leathers, a crossbow in his hands. Behind him, 2 more men, both armed. She recognized the lead hunter, Marcus, one of the men Thomas had sold her to. There you are, little rabbit. Marcus's smile was predatory. Thought you could hide with monsters? Bad choice. Stay back, Elena warned. though her voice trembled. Marcus laughed. Or what? He never finished the sentence. Lucian appeared behind the hunters like smoke made solid, moving so fast Elena's eyes couldn't track it. One moment, he wasn't there. The next, he had Marcus by the throat, lifting him off the ground with one hand. The other two hunters spun, weapons rising, but Lucian was faster. He moved with a terrible grace, inhuman and precise. A kick sent one hunter flying into the wall with a crack of breaking bone. The crossbow fired, but Lucian twisted, and the bolt buried itself in the doorframe, inches from Elena's head. Elena, down. Lucian's voice was command and desperation. She dropped, and he threw Marcus at the third hunter. Both men went sprawling. Lucian stood between her and the hunters, and for the first time, Elena saw him truly unleashed, eyes burning silver gold, lips pulled back to reveal fangs. Every line of him screaming apex predator. You dare, he said, his voice dropping to something that resonated in the bones. Bring weapons into my house. Threaten someone under my protection. Break the oldest laws of sanctuary. Marcus struggled to his feet, clutching his throat. She's not yours to protect, demon. She belongs to no one but herself. Lucian's words cut like razors. And you've made a fatal error coming here. More footsteps thundered up the stairs. Elena's stomach dropped. How many had come? There's a dozen of us, Marcus wheezed, backing toward the door. You kill us. More will come. We know what you are now. We'll bring the church. Bring fire and silver and holy water. We'll burn you out. Lucian went utterly still. You think I'm alone? Elena saw Marcus's confidence falter. This is House Draven territory, Lucian continued, his voice soft and deadly. These mountains, these woods, every shadow and stone, they answer to me. You're not fighting one vampire. You're fighting everything I've built in 500 years. As if on cue, the temperature in the room plummeted. The candles guttered. From somewhere deep in the keep came a sound like wind through a crypt, and Elena could have sworn the shadows themselves grew teeth. The hunters felt it too. She saw terror bloom in their eyes. Run, Lucian said quietly. Take your men. Leave my territory. If I see you again, if I catch your scent anywhere near this keep, I won't be merciful. Marcus hesitated, pride warring with survival instinct. Survival won. He grabbed his fallen companion and fled, shouting for the others to retreat. The thunder of boots receded down the stairs, through the halls, and finally, the sound of the main door slamming. Silence fell like snow. Lucian stood motionless, his back to Elena, shoulders rigid with tension. Slowly, carefully, he turned to face her. His eyes were still burning, his fangs still visible, but his hands were shaking. Are you hurt? His voice was rough, strained. Elena shook her head, unable to speak. She was still gripping the poker, knuckles white. Good, that's good. He took a step back, putting distance between them. I apologize. You shouldn't have seen me like that. I lost control, and you saved me. Elena interrupted. He blinked, surprise breaking through the monster's mask. What? You saved me? Again? She lowered the poker slowly. They came to take me back, to finish what Thomas started. And you stopped them. I nearly killed them. His voice cracked. I wanted to. When I saw them in your room, threatening you, Elena, I wanted to tear them apart with my bare hands. That's what I am. What? I've always been under the civilized veneer. Elena set down the poker and took a step toward him. He immediately stepped back, maintaining distance. Don't, he said. I'm not safe right now. The bloodlust, it takes time to fade, and you're wounded. And the scent, is that why you're shaking? She asked softly. Because you're fighting yourself? His jaw clenched. Yes. Then fight. I'll wait. She sat on the edge of the bed, deliberately calm, deliberately trusting. Lucian stared at her like she'd lost her mind. But slowly, so slowly, the silver fire in his eyes began to dim. His fangs retracted. The terrible tension in his shoulders eased fraction by fraction. Minutes passed. Elena kept her breathing, even, her posture open, showing him she wasn't afraid. Showing him she trusted him to win the battle with his own nature. Finally, Lucian sank into a chair by the cold fireplace, his head in his hands. They'll be back, he said hoarsely. Marcus was right. They'll bring more men, better weapons. They'll tell stories about the monster in the mountains, and those stories will spread. House Draven can't afford that attention. The other vampire houses already shun me. If humans start hunting me seriously, then what do we do? He looked up, and she saw exhaustion in every line of him. We, Elena, This isn't your fight. They came for me. Made it my fight. She stood, moved closer not too close, respecting his space. You said I was under your protection. Does that go both ways? What are you suggesting? That we stop running separately and start planning together. Her voice steadied with conviction. You know vampire politics and these mountains. I know how men like Marcus think, how they'll try to justify their hunt. Together, maybe we can together, Lucian repeated, as if the word was foreign. You'd stand with a vampire against your own kind? They stopped being my kind when they tried to buy and sell me. Elena's hands clenched into fists. And you've shown me more humanity in a week than most humans showed me in years. Something shifted in Lucian's expression, hope, fragile and dangerous. If we do this, if we work together, you need to understand, it will be war. Marcus won't stop. The men he brings won't stop. And if other vampire houses hear I'm protecting a human so openly, they'll have questions. Dangerous questions. Then we'd better have good answers. Lucian stood, and despite his exhaustion, despite everything, he smiled. You're either very brave or very foolish. Can I be both? His laugh was soft, surprised. Yes, I suppose you can. He moved toward the door, then paused. We should fortify the outer defenses. Set watches. I have. Resources I haven't used in decades. Time to remember what House Draven was capable of. And me? Elena asked. What can I do? He looked back at her, and in his ancient eyes she saw respect. Heal. Train. Learn to survive in this world you've stumbled into. Because Elena, whether you realize it or not, you've just chosen a side in a conflict that's been brewing for centuries. What conflict? The one between monsters who remember their humanity and men who've forgotten theirs. He left her then, striding into the corridor with renewed purpose. Elena stood in her ransacked room, broken glass glittering on the floor, and realized with crystalline clarity that her old life was gone. Not stolen, she'd burned it herself when she chose mountains over captivity. Now she was choosing something new, alliance with darkness. Partnership with a vampire who cooked meals he couldn't taste and fought wars against his own nature. Outside, the sun rose over the mountains, indifferent to the battle lines being drawn in its shadow. Inside the Black Keep, two wounded souls began preparing for the storm they knew was coming. Chapter 6. Blood Oaths. An ancient lost the library smelled of old leather and older secrets. Elena followed Lucian through towering shelves that seemed to stretch into shadow. Past books bound in materials she didn't want to examine too closely. He moved with purpose now, the exhaustion from the morning's violence replaced by something focused and dangerous. Here, he said, pulling a thick tome from a high shelf. Dust motes swirled in the candlelight as he set it on a reading table. If we're doing this, if we're truly standing together, you need to understand what you're walking into. Elena sat across from him. The book was ancient, its cover unmarked, its pages yellowed with age. When Lucian opened it, she saw text in languages she couldn't read, interspersed with diagrams that made her skin crawl. Vampire law, Lucian began. His finger tracing symbols on the page, is older than most human kingdoms. It was established after the Blood Wars, centuries of vampires turning humans indiscriminately, creating chaos, drawing attention we couldn't afford. The surviving houses gathered and created the covenant. What kind of covenant? Rules of survival. He turned pages, revealing an illustration of 5 crest houses. She realized, vampire houses. 5 great houses originally. House Draven in the north, House Moreau in the west, House Constantine in the east, House Valencia in the south, House Ashford at the center, in what's now London. Acting as arbiters, Elena studied the crests. Draven's was a raven clutching a crown. Originally? You said 5 originally. Lucian's expression darkened. House Constantine fell during the plague years. Some say they were cursed. Others say they simply lost the will to continue. After losing to many, they'd turned. Their territory was absorbed by the other houses. And where do you fit now? After 300 years alone? Nowhere. The word was bleak. House Draven still exists in name, but I hold no seat in the night courts. I attend no councils. I'm a ghost of what we were, a single vampire haunting an empty keep, maintaining old borders no one else remembers. He turned more pages, revealing dense text. But the laws still bind me. And if the other houses learn I'm actively protecting a human from human hunters, they'll invoke the old codes. What codes? Lucian met her eyes. The covenant forbids vampires from interfering in human affairs. We can feed with consent, but we cannot involve ourselves in human politics. human wars, human justice. It's meant to keep us hidden, keep us safe from the kind of attention that leads to witch hunts and stake-wielding mobs. But you're already involved, Elena said. You saved me, twice. Saving you in the mountains was mercy. Housing you here could be argued as sanctuary. Old laws protect that. But fighting human hunters? Threatening them? Defending you openly? He shook his head. That crosses lines. House Moreau especially will take issue. They're traditional, rigid. Their lord, Sebastian, believes humans are food and nothing more. Elena felt cold despite the warmth of the library. What happens if they invoke these codes against you? Trial by the night court. If found guilty of breaking the covenant, the punishment is usually exile, forced to leave your territory, your house dissolved. He paused. Or in extreme cases, execution, final death, staked, burned, made to watch the sun rise. Lucian, but there's a loophole. He turned the page with sudden intensity. The old codes allow for blood oaths, formal bonds between vampire and human. If you were bound to house Draven, if you were under my protection by ancient right, not just my mercy, then defending you wouldn't be interference. It would be defending my own. Elena's pulse quickened. What does a blood oath entail? An exchange. My blood, your blood, mixed and sworn before witnesses, or in this case, before the old magic that still remembers when these laws mattered. His fingers traced a diagram showing two figures, a blade, a chalice. It would tie us together. Not turn you, that requires far more blood and intent, but mark you as mine in ways the other houses would have to respect. Mark me how? Lucian hesitated. You'd carry my scent. Other vampires would know instantly you were oath-bound. You'd heal faster, age slower, not immortal, but extended. And the bond goes both ways. I'd feel your pain, sense your fear, know when you're in danger. We'd be connected. Elena's mind raced. And the cost? There's always a cost. The cost is freedom. His voice was careful, measured. Once bound, you couldn't leave House Draven territory without my permission. You'd be legally mine in the eyes of vampire law, not property, but bound. And if I die, the oath dies with me. You'd be left unmarked, unprotected, fair game for any house that wanted to question you about what you knew. But I'd be safe from Marcus. From human hunters. Yes, they couldn't touch you without invoking vampire law, and even the boldest human doesn't want that attention. He closed the book carefully. But Elena, you need to understand, this isn't just legal protection. The blood oath creates real connection. You'd feel me in the back of your mind, a presence, awareness. Some humans find it comforting. Others say it's like wearing chains made of someone else's soul. Elena stood, pacing between the shelves. The weight of the decision pressed against her ribs. Freedom or safety? Independence or protection? The choice felt horribly familiar. Another cage dressed up as salvation. What do you want? She asked, turning to face him. If I do this, what would you want from me? Lucian stood slowly, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked uncertain. Honestly, I don't know. I haven't had anyone bound to me in over 3 centuries. The idea of being responsible for another life, of feeling someone else's heartbeat alongside my own. He stopped. It terrifies me. Then why offer it? Because Marcus was right. They will come back. And next time, they'll bring silver and fire and holy symbols. And I'm one vampire against however many men your husband can buy. His hands clenched. I can't protect you and the keep and maintain the pretense that I'm still strong enough to hold this territory. But if you were oath-bound, if you were officially House Draven's ward, it changes everything. The other houses would have to acknowledge my claim. Marcus would face vampire law if he touched you. But you'd own me. No, the word was fierce. The oath doesn't grant ownership, just protection and responsibility. You'd still have your will, your choices. I'd just be bound to defend them. Elena moved to the window, looking out at the mountains, bathed in afternoon light. She thought about Thomas, about the auction, about running through snow with a wound in her side. She'd fled one cage only to find herself considering another. But was it the same? Thomas had taken her choices through manipulation and cruelty. Lucian was offering her a choice, a terrible one, weighted with consequences, but still hers to make. If I agree, she said slowly, I want conditions. Name them. She turned to face him. The oath binds us both. If I can't leave without permission, you can't feed from me without asking. If I'm responsible for House Draven's reputation, you're responsible for my well-being, not just physical safety, but freedom to think, speak, disagree. Lucian's expression shifted, surprise giving way to something like admiration. You're negotiating terms with a vampire. I'm negotiating terms with a partner. She lifted her chin. We do this as equals, or not at all. He crossed the space between them, and she noticed he moved like a man now, not a predator, slower, more careful, giving her time to adjust to his proximity. When he spoke, his voice was soft with something that might have been hope. Partners, he repeated. Elena, if you're certain, if you truly choose this, I'll honor every condition. I'll write them into the oath itself. When would we do it? Tonight? The ritual works best under moonlight, and we can't afford to wait. Marcus might return any day. Elena took a breath, then another. Then tonight, she agreed. We bind ourselves to each other, and dare the world to break us. Lucian smiled, sad and fierce, and almost human. You're either the bravest person I've ever met or the most reckless. Still, can't I be both? Always, he said, and something in his ancient eyes looked almost young. Chapter 7. Fire and ash. They came at dusk, just as Lucian had predicted. Elena stood at the upper window of the east tower, watching torchlight bloom in the valley below like malevolent stars. 20 men at least, maybe more. She could hear them even from this distance, shouting, the clang of weapons, the crackle of fire. They're early. Lucian appeared beside her, silent as always. He'd dressed for battle, dark leather instead of fine cloth, his hair pulled back, revealing the sharp angles of his face. We haven't performed the oath yet. Does it matter now? Elena asked, her fingers gripping the stone windowsill. Yes. He turned to her, urgent. The ritual takes time, and once begun, we're both vulnerable. If they breach the keep while we're mid-oath, an explosion shook the western wall. Stone dust rained from the ceiling. Elena stumbled, and Lucian caught her, his cold hand steadying. What was that? Gunpowder. His voice was grim. They came prepared. Another explosion, closer. The sound of splintering wood echoed up from below the main gate. Elena realized. They were battering it down. How long can the doors hold? She asked. Minutes. Not more. Lucian released her, moving to a weapons rack she hadn't noticed before. He pulled down a short sword, tested its weight, then handed it to her. Can you use this? Elena's hands shook as she gripped the hilt. I've never point the sharp end at anything that bleeds, and thrust hard. He armed himself with weapons that looked ancient and deadly, a longer blade, to daggers, a crossbow. Stay behind me. If they get past me, run. There's a passage in my chambers that leads to the catacombs. Follow it east until you reach the mountain road. I'm not leaving you. Elena, we're partners, remember? You don't get to martyr yourself. She hefted the sword, finding its balance. Besides, the oath goes both ways. If you die, I'm unprotected anyway. Better we survive together. The main gate gave way with a sound like thunder. Shouts erupted from below, men pouring into the keep, their voices echoing off stone. Lucian's jaw clenched. Then stay close and do exactly as I say. They moved through the corridors, Lucian leading, Elena following with her sword raised. The sounds of invasion grew louder, boots on stone, furniture being overturned, glass breaking. The hunters were searching room by room. Here, a voice shouted from the floor below. The stairs. He'll try to trap us in the narrow passages. Smart, Lucian muttered. He pulled Elena into an alcove, his hand over her mouth. She felt his coldness against her lips, felt the absence of breath, and her heart hammered. 5 hunters ran past, not seeing them in the shadows. The moment they passed, Lucian moved. He was a blur of violence. The first hunter dropped without a sound, throat crushed. The second swung a blade, but Lucian was faster, disarming him and breaking his wrist in one fluid motion. The third managed to fire a crossbow. The bolt buried itself in Lucian's shoulder. He didn't even flinch. Elena watched in horrified awe as he fought with the precision of centuries, each movement economical, brutal, effective. The remaining hunters fell back, fear replacing confidence. Demon. One screamed. It's the demon. No, Lucian said coldly, yanking the bolt from his shoulder. I'm much worse. I'm a vampire who's decided to stop being civilized. He blurred forward again. Elena lost track of the fight in the speed of it. Glimpses of violence, sounds of impact, the wet sound of blade meeting flesh. When it ended, all 5 hunters were down, unconscious or worse. Lucian turned to her, blood splattered across his face. Are you? Another explosion. This one inside the keep. The floor buckled beneath them. Elena screamed as the stones gave way, and then she was falling. Lucian's hand grasping for hers, she hit the ground hard, the impact driving air from her lungs. Pain exploded in her ribs. Above her, the ceiling had collapsed, revealing the floor she'd been standing on moments before. Dust choked the air. Elena? Lucian was beside her in an instant, pulling rubble away. Talk to me. Can you breathe? She gasped, nodded. Everything hurt, but nothing felt broken. The explosion, they're using siege tactics now, trying to bring the keep down around us. He helped her sit up, his hands, checking for injuries with surprising gentleness. This is escalating beyond a simple hunt. Someone's funding this, arming them with military-grade weapons. Thomas doesn't have that kind of money. Elena wheezed. No, but I'm starting to suspect this isn't about you anymore. Lucian's expression was dangerous. This smells like vampire politics. Someone wants me dead and is using Marcus as a convenient excuse. Before Elena could respond, more hunters appeared at the end of the corridor. She counted 6, all armed with crossbows, all aimed at Lucian. Move and we fire, Marcus said, stepping forward. His throat was bruised from where Lucian had grabbed him that morning. You're fast, demon, but not faster than 6 bolts at once. Lucian positioned himself in front of Elena, shielding her with his body. This ends now, Marcus. Leave, or I start killing in earnest. Brave words from a monster surrounded. Marcus smiled, cruel and confident. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to step aside and let us take the girl. In exchange, we'll leave your keep standing. Refuse, and we burn it to the ground with you in it. She's under my protection. She's human chattel running from legal debts. You have no claim, actually, Elena said, pushing herself to her feet despite Lucian's warning hand. He does. She pulled the small blade Lucian had given her earlier, a ritual knife. He'd called it, meant for the oath ceremony. Before he could stop her, she drew it across her palm. Blood welled, bright and red. Elena? No, she grabbed his hand, pressed her bleeding palm to his. By blood given freely, I bind myself to House Draven. Witness this, all who stand here. I am Elena Thornwood, and I claim sanctuary under ancient right. The words felt right, felt true, like something older than speech recognizing itself. The air in the corridor changed, grew heavy, electric, waiting. Lucian stared at her, shock written across his features. You can't, the ritual isn't complete. The moon doesn't matter. Elena kept their hands pressed together, felt his blood cold, foreign mixing with hers. Intent matters. You taught me that, and I intend to bind myself to you now, before these witnesses, because we don't have time for ceremony. Something shifted in the air. The shadows in the corridor deepened, grew teeth, responded to old magic being invoked in desperate circumstances. Marcus took a step back. What is this? This, Lucian said quietly, and his voice carried weight that made the stones vibrate, is a blood oath. She's mine now. House Draven's ward, claimed and marked. Touch her, and you invoke vampire law. She's human. You can't, the law doesn't care about species. Lucian's eyes burned silver. It cares about blood and oaths and magic older than your god. And you just witnessed both. The hunter's crossbows wavered. Elena saw doubt creeping into their expressions. Fear replacing confidence. One choice, Lucian continued, his free hand still gripping Elena's. Their blood mingling and sealing something neither fully understood yet. Leave now, abandon this hunt, and I'll let you walk away. Stay, and I'll show you why humans used to tell stories about my house that made grown men weep. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Marcus lowered his crossbow, and Elena saw the exact moment he chose survival over pride. This isn't over, he said, backing toward the exit. Yes, Lucian replied. It is. The hunters fled, their footsteps echoing away into silence. Elena and Lucian stood in the ruined corridor, hands still joined, blood still mixing, the incomplete oath binding them in ways neither had anticipated. That, Lucian said finally, was either brilliant or insane. Still, can I be both? He laughed, and it sounded like relief and terror, and something that might have been joy. Chapter 8. The weight of Promised Moon had risen by the time they made it to Lucian's chambers. Elena's hand still throbbed where she'd cut it, though the bleeding had stopped. Lucian had wrapped it carefully with strips of linen torn from his own shirt, his cold fingers gentle against her skin. Neither of them had spoken much during the climb through the damaged keep. Too exhausted for words, now she sat on the edge of his bed larger than hers, draped in midnight blue velvet while he paced before the fireplace like a caged wolf. you shouldn't have done that, he said finally, breaking the silence. The oath in complete, improvised Elena. You have no idea what you've started. I saved us. She cradled her bandaged hand. Marcus left. The hunters left, for now. He spun to face her, and his eyes still held traces of that silver fire. But an oath invoked without proper ritual, without the full ceremony, it's unstable, dangerous. The bond is forming wrong, and I can already feel it. Feel what? Lucian pressed his hand to his chest. Your heartbeat, your pain, the ribs you bruised in the fall, the cut on your palm, the exhaustion weighing you down. It's all here, inside me, like an echo. I can't silence. Elena's breath caught. I don't feel anything. Because the bond is incomplete, one-sided. I'm bound to you, but you're not fully bound to me yet, he resumed, pacing, agitated in a way she'd never seen. The proper ritual would have balanced it, created equal connection. What you did, it's like building half a bridge and expecting it to hold weight. Then we complete it. Elena stood, though her bruised ribs protested. Tonight, now, finish what I started. It's not that simple. Lucian ran his hands through his hair, destroying its careful order. The ritual requires specific words, specific intentions, both parties willing and clear-headed. You're injured, exhausted, running on fear and adrenaline. This isn't the state to make eternal choices. Eternal? The word hung between them like a blade. The oath doesn't expire when you die. His voice was quiet, terrible. It ends when I do, which means potentially centuries of being bound to me, of feeling me, of belonging to House Draven, even beyond death. Some say oath-bound humans become ghosts when they die, tied to their vampire until final dissolution. Elena sat back down slowly, the weight of what she'd done finally settling into her bones. You didn't mention that part earlier, because I didn't think you'd invoke it in the middle of a siege. He crossed to her, dropped to his knees so they were eye level. Elena, listen to me. We can try to break this. It's not sealed yet. I could drink the blood from your veins, purge the magic before it takes root. You'd be free, and vulnerable again, but free. She looked into his ancient eyes and saw genuine anguish there, not for himself, but for her. He was offering her an escape from the very protection he'd promised, because he valued her freedom more than his own needs. It made her decision easier. No, she said firmly. We finish it. Tonight? Elena, I chose this, Lucian. Maybe impulsively, maybe desperately, but I chose it, and I'm choosing it again, now. Clear-headed and certain, she took his cold hand in her bandaged one. You've given me more respect in a week than I had in years of marriage. You've protected me, fed me, listened to me. You've shown me what partnership looks like instead of ownership. So, yes, I want this bond. I want to be tied to you, because you're the first person who's ever made me feel like my choices matter. Something cracked in his expression, pain and hope warring for dominance. You don't understand what you're saying. The bond will change you. You'll feel my hunger, my isolation, the weight of all my dead. Marguerite used to say, being oath-bound to me was like carrying someone else's grief in her pockets. Marguerite was oath-bound to you. Yes, the admission came quietly. For 53 years before she died, she chose it to protect our children, to mark them as vampire protected in a world that was growing dangerous. And she paid the price, age slower, yes, but also felt every moment of my pain when I failed them. Elena squeezed his hand. Did she regret it? I never asked. Too afraid of the answer. Then I'll tell you what she would have said. Elena leaned forward until their foreheads nearly touched. That partnership means sharing burdens, not just joys. That love isn't just sunlight, it's also standing together in darkness. That she chose you, again and again, and the bond only made it official. Lucian's eyes closed. You speak of love. We barely know each other. I speak of choice, Elena corrected. Love can come later. Right now, I'm choosing alliance with someone who sees me as human, not property. That's worth any price. When he opened his eyes, they were wet. She'd never seen a vampire cry before, didn't know they could. The tears tracked down his pale cheeks like diamonds, and she reached up to catch one on her finger. All right, he whispered. All right, we'll complete the ritual. But Elena, if you ever regret this, if the bond becomes a cage, promise you'll tell me. Promise you won't suffer in silence the way I know you've learned to do. I promise. If you promise the same. He laughed, broken and beautiful. Deal. They prepared the ritual together. Lucian retrieved the ancient book from the library, carrying it with reverent care. He laid out candles in a circle on his chamber floor, their flames casting dancing shadows on the walls. He filled a silver chalice with wine so dark it looked like blood. "We'll need to cut deeper this time," he said, showing her the ritual blade different from the one she'd used before. This one etched with symbols that seemed to move in the firelight. Enough blood to fill the chalice halfway. "It will hurt. Everything worthwhile does." He smiled at that, sad and knowing. "You sound like Marguerite. Is that bad?" "No, it's comforting. Like some part of her approved of you enough to lend you her wisdom." They knelt facing each other in the circle of candles, the chalice between them. Outside, the damaged keep groaned in the wind. But here, in this room, there was only candlelight and old magic waiting to be invoked. "Are you ready?" Lucian asked, the blade poised over his palm. Elena extended her hand, the bandage already removed, the cut from earlier still visible. "Yes." He drew the blade across his palm first, deep, deliberate. His blood welled up, darker than human blood, almost black in the dim light. Then he took her hand, gentle, despite the violence to come, and met her eyes. "This will hurt," he warned again. "I know." The blade bit deep. Elena gasped, but didn't pull away. Her blood mingled with his in the chalice, red and black, swirling together like storm clouds. And the candles flared bright enough to blind. Lucian began to speak in a language older than Latin, older than any tongue she knew. The words resonated in her bones, in her blood, in the space between heartbeats. The air grew thick with power, and Elena felt it begin, the bridge completing itself, the bond snapping into place like a key turning in a lock she hadn't known existed. Suddenly, she could feel him. His hunger, old and controlled. His loneliness, vast as oceans. His fierce protectiveness, sharp as the blade he held. His hope, fragile and terrible, that maybe this time he could save someone. And beneath it all, a truth that made her breath catch. He cared for her. Genuinely, deeply, in ways he was too afraid to speak aloud. The ritual reached its crescendo. They lifted the chalice together and drank. The taste of mixed blood, bitter and sweet, and impossibly binding on their tongues. When it was done, when the candles had dimmed and the magic settled into their bones like marriage vows, they knelt there, bound and breathless, staring at each other across the space that was no longer quite a space, not when they could feel each other's presence like a second heartbeat. "Hello," Lucian said softly, and she heard the word both with her ears and somehow deeper. In that new space where their souls touched. "Hello," Elena whispered back, and felt his relief wash through her like rain. They were bound now. Truly, completely, eternally bound. And despite everything, the danger, the uncertainty, the weight of forever, Elena felt something unfurl in her chest that felt remarkably like peace. Chapter 9. Learning to breathe. The days that followed were strange and tender. Elena woke each morning to the sensation of Lucian's presence in the back of her mind, not intrusive, but constant, like background music she was learning to hear. She could feel when he was near, sense his moods shifting like weather patterns. Know without asking when he was hunting in the woods or reading in the library, or standing at the tower window watching the mountains. It should have been unsettling. Instead, it felt like finally having company after years of profound loneliness. "You're getting better at shielding," Lucian said one evening as they sat in the library, books spread between them. He'd been teaching her about vampire houses, their histories and hierarchies, preparing her for the attention their oath would inevitably draw. Elena looked up from a tome describing House Moreau's territorial claims. "Shielding? Controlling what I feel through the bond." He set down his own book, a treatise on human psychology. She'd noticed with amusement. "The first few days, your every emotion hit me like a wave. Now you've learned to mute them somewhat. It's instinctive, but you're doing it well. I can still feel you clearly," she admitted. "Right now, you're anxious about something. And tired, though you're trying to hide it." Lucian's lips quirked. "The blood oath doesn't lie. Yes, I'm tired. The fight with Marcus's men, the siege damage, maintaining the keep's defenses while wounded, it's taking its toll. Animal blood doesn't replenish me the way it should." Elena closed her book. "You need to feed properly. I'm managing, Lucian." She leaned forward. "I can feel your hunger through the bond. It's like a constant ache. You're starving yourself. I've survived on less." His tone was dismissive, but she felt the shame beneath it, the old guilt he carried about his nature. "What if," Elena paused, choosing her words carefully, "what if you fed from me?" The temperature in the library dropped. Lucian went utterly still, and through the bond she felt his immediate, visceral refusal. No, I'm not. The oath already binds us. My blood already carries your mark, exactly why I can't. He stood abruptly, pacing between the shelves. Elena, feeding from someone you're oath-bound to is. It's the deepest intimacy possible between vampire and human. It creates dependency, addiction, feelings that aren't real, but feel real. I won't do that to you. What if I'm offering willingly? Your willingness doesn't make it safe. He turned to face her, and his eyes were anguished. When a vampire feeds from their oath-bound, the pleasure is overwhelming for both parties. The human becomes addicted to the sensation, craves it, starts to need it. And the vampire starts to see them as belonging, as possessed. It's how bonds turn into chains. Elena absorbed this quietly. Is that what happened with Marguerite? No, I never fed from her. Not once in 53 years. His voice was firm. I swore the day we took the oath that I'd never blur those lines with her. She was my wife first, my oath-bound second. I refused to let hunger corrupt what we had. And with me? Lucian crossed to her, knelt beside her chair so they were eye level. With you, it's even more important. You've just escaped one man who treated you as property. I won't become another kind of cage, no matter how gilded. The fierce protectiveness in his voice, in his presence through the bond, made Elena's throat tight. You're starving yourself to protect my autonomy. Yes, that's either very noble or very stupid. Still, can't I be both? He echoed her own words back with a small smile. Elena reached out, touching his face the first time she'd initiated such contact. His skin was cold as marble, smooth as stone, but she could feel the person beneath. Then let's compromise. You feed from humans in town, with consent. I know there must be people who there aren't. Lucian's expression turned bleak. I'm the monster in the mountains, Elena. The demon parents used to frighten children into obedience. No one in the villages would willingly let me near their throat, oath or no oath. Then we find other vampires. You said there are houses who've shunned me for 3 centuries, who'd see my weakness and exploit it. He took her hand, cradling it gently. I appreciate your concern, truly, but I've survived this long on animal blood and stubbornness. I'll survive longer. Through the bond, Elena felt the lie beneath his brave words. He was fading, slowly but inevitably, and he knew it. The siege had cost him more than he'd admit. Teach me something, she said, changing tactics. About your world. Something you loved before everything went dark. Lucian blinked at the sudden shift. What? You said you'd teach me vampire rules, house politics, how to survive in this world. But I want to know what made you want to survive. What did you love? He was quiet for a long moment then. Music. I loved music. Elena waited. There was a tradition. He continued softly. In the old days, before the plague, House Draven would host gatherings, not the formal night courts, but intimate evenings. Vampires and selected humans, oath-bound families, all together. We'd have musicians, dancers, poets. Marguerite would play the virginal, and he stopped. You'd what? I'd sing. The admission came reluctantly. I had a decent voice once. Haven't used it in centuries. Elena stood, pulling him to his feet. Sing for me now. Elena, please. I want to hear something you loved. Something that reminds you why immortality isn't just burden. She felt his resistance through the bond, felt him wrestling with shame and memory and the fear of opening old wounds. But beneath it all, she felt a spark of something else, longing. The desire to share this part of himself, to be known. Finally he nodded. His voice, when it came, was rusty at first, centuries of disuse evident in the initial notes. But as he sang an old ballad in a language she didn't know, it strengthened, grew sure. It was beautiful, haunting, carrying the weight of ages, but also something achingly human. Elena closed her eyes and listened, felt through the bond how this act of vulnerability cost him, and how it also healed something he'd thought long dead. When the last note faded, she opened her eyes to find him watching her with an expression she couldn't name. Thank you, she whispered. No, his voice was rough with emotion. Thank you for reminding me I'm more than hunger and hollow halls. They stood there in the candlelit library, bound by blood and oath and something deeper that neither was quite ready to name. Outside, snow began to fall, blanketing the mountains in quiet. Inside, 2 wounded souls were learning that healing doesn't always mean forgetting. Sometimes it means remembering what you loved enough to survive its loss. Tomorrow, Lucian said, I'll teach you the old dances. The ones we used to do at those gatherings. They're beautiful, and you should know them. Tomorrow, Elena agreed. But tonight, sing me one more song. And he did, his ancient voice filling the space between them, transforming the library from a tomb of memories into something alive again, for the first time in 300 years. The Black Keep remembered what it meant to House Joy. Chapter 10. Dawn-breaking summons came on the first day of spring. Elena found it at dawn, pinned to the main gate with a silver dagger, a letter sealed with 4 crests she now recognized. House Moreau, House Valencia, House Ashford, and one she'd never seen, a serpent coiled around a crescent moon. Her hands shook as she carried it to Lucian. He read it in silence, his face growing progressively more still. When he finally looked up, his eyes were ancient and weary. The night court convenes in 3 days, he said quietly. They're calling me to answer for breaking the covenant, for interfering in human affairs, for creating an oath bond without court approval, he paused, for choosing you over 5 centuries of isolation. Elena felt his fear through the bond, not for himself, but for her. What happens at this court? They'll question us both, examine the oath, determine if it was coerced or freely given. If they find against me, he set down the letter carefully, as though it might shatter. House Draven will be dissolved. I'll be exiled from these territories, forbidden from ever returning. And you'll be released from the oath, unmarked, unprotected, back to being human chattel running from debts. Yes. Elena crossed to the window, looking out at the mountains, bathed in morning light. In the months since the siege, spring had come to the Black Keep. The gardens she'd discovered were blooming again, tended by her hands. The halls echoed with her laughter, with Lucian's voice singing old ballads, with the sound of 2 people learning to be less alone. She'd been happy here, truly happy, perhaps for the first time in her life. Then we fight, she said, turning back to him. We go to this court and we make them see what? Lucian's voice was gentle but bleak. That I'm a vampire who fell in. He stopped abruptly, the words dying on his lips. Elena's heart stuttered. Through the bond, she felt the truth. He'd almost spoken, felt it crash through him like a wave, felt his horror at nearly admitting it aloud. Say it, she whispered. Elena, say what you were going to say. Lucian, please. He crossed to her, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked afraid. I've lived 500 years, he began quietly. Loved once, lost everything, spent 3 centuries in the dark convincing myself I was better off alone. And then you stumbled into my mountains, bleeding and defiant, and so determinedly brave. And everything I'd carefully buried came roaring back. Lucian, I love you. The words fell between them like stones into deep water. I love your stubbornness, your kindness, the way you negotiated terms with a vampire like you were bartering for vegetables. I love that you truly see me and don't look away. I love you. And that's why the court will rule against me. Because love makes the oath invalid. It transforms protection into possession in their eyes. Elena's breath caught. Through the bond, she felt the truth of every word, felt the depth of emotion he'd been hiding beneath courtesy and careful distance. You're wrong, she said. He blinked. What? You're wrong about the court, about possession, about everything. She closed the distance between them, took his cold hands in her warm ones. Because I love you too. Have for weeks now, maybe longer. I love your gentleness, your guilt, the way you cook meals you can't taste because you want to care for someone. I love that you starve yourself rather than compromise my choices. I love you, Lucian Draven. And love doesn't make the oath invalid, it makes it real. The court won't see it that way. Then we make them. Elena's voice strengthened with conviction. We go to this court together, and we show them what we've built. Not ownership, not possession, partnership, choice, love that doesn't diminish autonomy but celebrates it. Lucian stared at her like she'd offered him the sun. You'd stand before the assembled vampire houses and defend what we have. I'd stand before God himself and defend it. She squeezed his hands. You saved me, Lucian. Not just from the mountains, but from believing I deserved cruelty. You showed me what it means to be cherished without being caged. I won't let them take that away from either of us. Through the bond, she felt his love crash over her like a wave, centuries of loneliness breaking against her certainty. His hope fragile but growing stronger. If we do this, he said slowly, we need to be strategic. The court respects strength, tradition, irrefutable proof. We need witnesses, documentation, evidence that the oath was freely given and benefits us both. Then let's start preparing. They spent the next 3 days in focused preparation. Elena learned the formal protocols of vampire courts, the proper ways to address ancient houses, the legal precedents that might support their case. Lucian gathered documents, the original oath texts, testimonies from the few humans in nearby villages who'd seen Elena moving freely through town. Even correspondence with House Ashford acknowledging that sanctuary oaths predated the covenant. On the third day, as sunset approached, they dressed for court. Lucian wore black velvet and silver, the formal regalia of House Draven. Dusty from centuries in storage, but still magnificent. He looked every inch the vampire lord, ancient and powerful. Elena wore deep burgundy silk that Lucian had found in the keep's storage, a gown that had belonged to Marguerite, altered to fit her. It felt right somehow, wearing the clothes of the woman who'd loved him first, who'd shown him that oaths could be partnerships. "Are you ready?" Lucian asked, offering his arm. Elena took it, felt his fear and love and fierce determination through the bond. Yes, they traveled by carriage through the night, arriving at House Ashford's estate as the moon reached its apex. The mansion was enormous, Gothic, lit by thousands of candles that made the windows glow like eyes. The night court convened in a circular chamber with a domed ceiling painted with stars. 5 thrones arranged in a semicircle, each occupied by a vampire so old they barely seemed real anymore. Lord Sebastian of House Moreau, dark-skinned, white-haired, his eyes like chips of obsidian. Lady Katerina of House Valencia, pale as snow, red-haired, beautiful and terrible. Lord Edmund of House Ashford, grey-bearded, grandfatherly, but with the predator's stillness they all shared. And on the smallest throne, a vampire Elena didn't recognize, young-looking, androgynous, with the serpent and moon crest on their chest. House Constantine, Lucian murmured through the bond. "I thought they'd fallen. We endured," the young vampire said, their voice neither male nor female. "Diminished, but not destroyed. I am Ash, last of my line, and I have questions about your arrangement, Lord Draven." The trial began. For hours, they questioned Elena and Lucian both. About the oath's creation, about coercion, about the siege in Marcus and the choices made in desperation. Lord Sebastian was hostile, suggesting the oath was manipulation. Lady Katerina was skeptical, questioning whether love could exist between species. Lord Edmund remained neutral, asking careful questions about precedent and protocol, but it was Ash of House Constantine who finally asked the question that mattered. "Do you regret the oath, Elena Thornwood?" Elena stood, facing the assembled vampires, with her spine straight and her voice clear. "No, I regret my marriage, my husband's cruelty, the years I wasted believing I deserved suffering. But the oath to Lucian Draven, that was the first free choice I've made in years. He's never commanded me, never forced me, never treated me as anything less than equal. The bond doesn't cage me, it freed me. And I'd choose it again, every day, for as long as I live." Silence fell across the chamber. Through the bond, Elena felt Lucian's overwhelming love, his gratitude, his fear that it still wouldn't be enough. The 5 vampire lords conferred in whispers to quiet for human ears. Finally, Lord Edmund rose. "The night court has reached a decision," he announced. "The oath between Elena Thornwood and Lucian Draven, while irregularly formed, shows evidence of free will and mutual benefit. We find no violation of the covenant. House Draven's claim is legitimate." Elena's knees nearly buckled with relief. "However," Lady Katerina added, her voice sharp, "House Draven is hereby required to maintain formal ties with the court. No more isolation, Lord Lucian. You've reminded us that love between our kinds is possible. Don't waste that reminder by hiding in your mountains." Lucian bowed deeply. "Understood, my lady." As they left the court, stepping out into the pre-dawn darkness, Elena felt Lucian's emotions through the bond: relief, joy, disbelief, and beneath it all, a love so profound it made her eyes sting with tears. "We won," she whispered. "You won," he corrected, pulling her close. "Your courage, your honesty, Elena, you saved us both." She looked up at him, this ancient vampire who'd learned to hope again. "No, we saved each other. That's what partnership means." He kissed her then, gentle and reverent. And through the bond she felt his promise to love her, to protect her autonomy, to walk beside her for as long as she'd have him. When they pulled apart, the first rays of dawn were touching the horizon. "We should go," Lucian said, "before the sun wait." Elena held him there, watching the sky lighten. "I want to see this with you. The dawn of our new life," so they stood together at the edge of darkness, watching the sun rise over a world that had finally made space for what they'd built, a love that respected boundaries, a bond that celebrated freedom, a partnership between mortal and immortal that proved some bridges were worth building. Even when the gap seemed impossible to cross, "I love you," Lucian whispered, as golden light painted the sky.